700. Any advance on 700? 750. Well done. 750. Going once. Going twice. Sold.
Our previous record was just over £4,000. We have raised this evening £9,600. I'm going to hand you over to the one you came to see, Mr. Chris Yates.
I'm sorry the other character who's meant to be here is not here. Apparently I didn't really define the moment when this was going to happen, according to Hugh. And he decided to go off to Scotland while I was making up my mind. And he's in Mull now, or on Mull. You're not in Mull, you're on Mull. It's an island of the Hebrides, and I would very much have liked to have gone with him. But I thought, no, I owe it to all you that I'm going to stay here and talk about. I wanted to talk about something else, but I'm going to have to talk about fish, and I'll talk about other things as well. But yeah, so I'm sorry that he's not here to share it. Although he would have liked to have shown, clips and things like that of the programme, of Fashion for Angling, and I said no, we don't do that. We should just march through and fight. I like an improvisatory kind of approach where Hugh likes something to be. As a filmmaker, you've got to do it that way. You've got to do it in a structured way. That's his way. So in a way, I'm quite happy because we would have been fighting. He would have wanted to do it his way, and I would have wanted to do it my way. And I would have kept butting in on him. So anyway, I'm hoping he's having a good time with the eagles, and he's already seen hen harriers. So I'm very very envious of him. And I'm sorry about the book signing just then, which took so long, but I was a little bit late getting here. And the reason I was late getting here is because I'm having trouble with staff. And it was recycling the other day, and I always I can't be bothered to clean out all the cans and the jars of marmalade and all the rest of it. So I put them all down on the kitchen floor the night before recycling comes, and then I go to bed, and in the morning it's sparkling because I've got 2 wood mice who live in the kitchen somewhere. I don't know where they live, but that's the routine. They clean everything for me. So that's my staff. But now they've found out where I put the cartons of milk. In a cupboard, it's out of the way, so they wouldn't find it, and they nibble the bottom of the cartons. I used to like normal milk with my tea, but now I like oat milk. I just find it more sort of satisfying. And they've taken the bottoms out of all my oat milk, and it was running out of the cupboard. And so I'm having to have, I'm going to have to get rid of the staff, which is terrible. It takes a long time to make tea when you haven't got staff. And anyway. So I apologise for that. I was a good half an hour late tidying up. And now we're meant to be talking about Passion for Angling, which all of you, I presume, has seen at some time or other in the past. And I don't know if the story ever came out as to how it began, how it started, and I thought that's where this is going to start anyway. Then we can go off into other directions. But it started off when a man called Graham Pepler, who was the manager of Davis Tackle in Christchurch, phoned me up. Probably, which year would that have been? It would have been 1988 maybe, middle of the 80s, I can't remember the exact time. He phoned up and said, it's my 40th birthday next week, and I've got a man here that you'd probably like to meet, Hugh Miles, and he's got an idea for doing a programme. Would you like to come to my birthday? I said, I can't. It's already, that day is already booked, because I was going off, somebody was going to show me a really very interesting and very secret and very private lake where we would not be able to sort of visit without darkness. And so, you know, I couldn't miss out on this. And so no, I didn't go to Graham's birthday party. But that was when it started, because he told me why Hugh Miles wanted to meet me. He'd got this idea of doing a fishing program, and he said he's been talking about it for a while, and I'd not heard anything about it. He's got this. He said it could be a really good little project. But can we arrange another day then when you could meet Hugh? So that's how it began. You know, just a man I'd never met before, because it was before my. No, it wasn't. It was during my first sort of few years of barbel fishing, when I was completely mad about barbel, and I would go down to Davis Tackle quite regularly, at least once a week, and I said we could meet here, and then we could go. I'd meet him in the shop, and we'd go up the river. We could talk about this idea, and we didn't. It never happened, because he was at that time he was doing a film about African wild dogs, and also he'd got this project about snow leopards that he wanted to do, which he thought he was never going to be able to do. So he was always busy. So it took a little while, and it was actually Bob James, who fished the same bit of river that Hugh fished, the Longford estate on the Avon, which I wasn't a member of then. I dropped out, but Hugh was there, and I'd never met him there, and Bob was there, and then I think it was Graham who said to Bob James, look, when you see him, tell him I'm going to get you three together. And it took a little while, so it was very, it was always on the edge of, was it ever going to happen? Would we ever all meet? And it was Bob who put me together with Hugh, and then we met and we chatted, and Bob said that he would be very happy to sort of, you know, help in some way or other. Originally he was just going to be the kind of you know, the driver. He liked the idea of, you know, finding different locations for us, and he was very keen on the idea. So, and I wasn't so keen, because it just seemed like it might take a long time, which in fact it did. I thought it would be. In fact, Hugh lied in a way. No, I mustn't say that. He told a kind of story that made it seem like it would be so easy. You know, we would just do one program, and anywhere you like. Where would you like to go? Come on, what should we do? And I said, well, I would really like to fish Redmire, and it'd be a nice place to make a film, because it's such a wonderful setting, and the potential for something dramatic to happen is always there. But in the fact that we'd be making a film about it would mean we would have to be showing ourselves a lot, and I like to keep my head down all the time, so that could be tricky. So why don't we go somewhere else? And Hugh said, no, Redmire. Everyone knows about Redmire. So it was being then run by the Carp Society, and they would put it out for a bid on the opening day. You could bid for the day. And somebody else wanted to go on the opening day as well. So you could imagine when we went to the Carp Society conference and the bidding began, I think it went, we were expecting it to go to 1,000, maybe 2,000. And I think it got to 5,000, which was absurd. I thought, well, that's it. We won't be going to do Redmire. But Hugh was absolutely, you know, determined. And I mean, good for him, because he just said, no, whatever it takes. And I don't think it quite made $5,000, the auction, but it was the Redmire bid. And that was it. And I thought, well, that's it. We will do that one program, and it will take, you know, we could do it in a couple of weeks, which is more or less 10 days we took doing it. And it was just superb. The weather was good every day. The weather was good. The fish were showing. We both caught Bob, and by that time Bob had, you know, he said, look, it'd be good. We have different styles of fishing. Our approach is different, and that would be an interesting, you know, interplay amongst the fishing. And we could try and catch something using different methods. And Hugh was, you know, he just loved the setting. He was very good at getting the background just right, and then the foreground perfect. So it was it would just go well. And also, it was that year in. I'm trying to remember the exact. It was the beginning of the season of 1980. It would have been 1988, I suppose. And that was the year I was given the Kelly kettle. I didn't know about Kelly kettles then, and nobody else really knew about them. And that was the saviour of that Redmire trip, because it was such a novel thing to do. And we'd be, the fish weren't feeding, nothing much was happening. I'll get the Kelly on them, and we'd light the Kelly, and the smoke would go up, and we'd make a cup of tea, and we'd sit around, and so gradually we got a kind of rhythm going, a kind of momentum going, and the fish did the rest. So it was a lovely thing to be able to just let happen, and by the end of the week, at the end of 10 days rather, I honestly thought that was it's a good experience, but I didn't want to do it again, because there was a kind of tension, because Hugh had put a lot of money into it. Apart from the bidding for the lake, there was all the other business. It was all on film. And film is very expensive. 16mm film, and he was always dashing off to the lab at Gloucester. He'd go to the lab. That was the nearest lab for getting 16mm film developed. And he'd always just look at the beginning of the film, so that he could just check that everything was happening. And it was just quite a process. But at the same time, we were, the fish were behaving themselves. They wanted to start. There was no doubt. I think we had 3 20-pounders each. We lost a couple of good fish, but and when we looked at the rushes, just the basic film in bits, not unedited, I thought, yeah, it was worth the effort. Let's hope that's it. But Hugh was so delighted with the way it turned out. He said, let's do another one. It'll only take a year. We'll do another film. We'll do 4 seasons. We'll do 4 films. I said, 4? Yeah, 4 seasons. We've done the summer. Now we're going to do autumn on the river, and then we'll do winter on another river, and then we'll do, a kind of, we can make it up, the 4th one. We'll find somewhere very special to go. And 4 years later, it was 6. And by then, I was getting just a little bit, frustrated, because it was taking so long to get everything right. If the fish weren't feeding, which they very well might not be in the middle of winter when the conditions change so quickly, we'd just have to start again. And so that's why it did take a long time. But once it was all together and everything was ready for the viewing with the BBC, and they liked it. They seemed very sure that this was going to be a success. I still wasn't quite happy. We had to do quite a lot of voiceovers in recording studios where we weren't actually recorded properly during the say a session when you're catching a big carp. It couldn't all be recorded as it was, so we had to edit little bits in. And that took quite a long time. And then when it finally came out in September of '93, we were all a bit nervous about it, except for Hugh. Hugh was absolutely convinced that it was a success, and that it was going to be it was going to be quite popular. But I didn't quite realise how popular it became, because it did work quite well, and we did like the way the total sort of picture that we'd had right from the beginning, that sort of sense of how this thing should sort of evolve, and what were the highlights, why were we going for this species, and what was the significance of that species, and what were the characteristics of those fish. So we had to sort of cover all that, but they were portrayed really well. They were given the right light, if you like, by Hugh, and so yes, it went down quite well. But and then it was shown again. That was in September to November of '93, and it was shown again, I think, in the middle of the following year. And that was it. You know, nowadays you get things repeated again and again, but that was still quite a, you know, it was something that was different because of the way, I think because of the way the anglers were, if you like, Bob and I were relating to one another, and Hugh managed to just capture those very special moments where everything seems to come together and the light would be just right, and there'd be a ripple just at that moment where you wanted to be a ripple, as something just turned on the surface, or the sun was just going down, or the mist was just. There was a lovely moment in the Redmire film when it's just that lovely mist, and then you see, then we see us going out for a gudgeon match in a punt. You just think it's not going to be terribly dramatic, but it just looked superb. So I think all those little side issues did work very well, and maybe a year later Hugh had this idea that we would do another one, and that was it. I just said no, we won't be doing another one, because it's he just felt that we could go further, but I'm glad in a way we didn't do it. I mean, he was sure that project at work was a success. But he was always up for doing another kind of version of it. But I did do a film with him later on, a carp fishing film. I can't even remember what it was called, but and it was very relaxed and very laid back, and we just let things happen and it wasn't a terribly kind of it didn't tell a great story other than just, you know, man at a lake fishing for a carp. That was it. But I think the storytelling in Passion for Angling was rather good because of the mix of characters, other people we would meet, and the children who we involved, my own children. And what is often forgotten is that my son, Alex, who was 4 at the time, he could have been 4 or 5, probably 5. Yeah, he caught the first fish of Passion for Angling when he caught, you know, a little mirror carp at the village pond at Tollard Royal, which is literally just 3 miles from here, not even 3 miles. And unfortunately the carp are not in there anymore. The pond dried up in a bad year, and they all disappeared. But yeah, Alex caught the first fish, and then just by strange coincidence, he also caught the last fish of the series when we fished the monster lake, Harry's Lake, which is, again, not far from here, maybe 2.5 miles from here, down at Wimborne St Giles. And he caught a dace, because it's connected to the Allen system, the River Allen, lovely little chalk stream. And these dace had obviously come up the chalk stream over the years and had colonised the lake. And of course, the carp that were in the lake were massive. Oh, they weren't all massive, but there was 2 or 3 huge fish. And that was the exciting kind of finale to the series. And the fact that it was a local lake did mean that we could go down more or less whenever we wanted, just to see what was happening and whether, because they were very, very, they'd never been fished for ever. And you'd have thought that would have made it easier to try and catch, you know, the big one, Harry. And we called it Harry because Harry Teasdale was he was the woodsman there. He was the forester on the estate, and he had seen it. And I knew Harry because he was in a pub around here. It wasn't in Handley, but he was somewhere around here. And I heard him talking about this huge fish in the lake just down the lane. And of course, I couldn't let it go like that. I had to find out sort of where that was. We were looking for somewhere special. It was when we were making Passion for Angling, and we hadn't decided what to do for the last. And I said, look, it's really close. If we can get permission, we might not be able to, but that would be a nice one to do because it was sort of equidistant from all our homes, and you know there was a lot of travelling to do with when we had to go up to the Thames or especially going up to Scotland and trying to catch a blooming salmon. I mean that. It took a long time and a lot of effort, and there was a moment during the first salmon series where I thought the whole thing was going to collapse because, yeah, there were certain differences of opinion at that stage about how we should get on, and it wasn't working. But if we had a little local lake that was a magical local lake, and we could just go whenever we wanted, and then everything would converge at a certain moment, and then the fish might start to turn if people were keeping an eye on it all the time, and which is more or less what happened. And we did see Harry, the big film, the big film, the big. Sorry, it was when the season had begun, and we were going to give this last sort of 6 months to the final programme, and then Hugh suddenly phoned up and said, "We haven't got 6 months. We've got to do it now. We've got to do it in 3 months. We've got to get the." We'd already seen the place, but we hadn't really sort of got to grips with it. But we hadn't caught any fish from it, and so we had to sort of get our heads down and just trust to luck. And I would make several prayers to Isaac Walton, who every now and again would answer me and say, "Go to such and such a spot in the lake." And in fact, it was a sign from Isaac that gave us the final vision of Harry, because I was up a tree. Hugh was putting up a sort of scaffold tower, so we get his camera right on the top. Bob was actually fishing, and he was about to fish, and I was at the top of this alder, looking down across the lake. It's crystal clear, never more than maybe 5 foot deep, and suddenly I saw this movement, and I said, I think I'm seeing not 3 fish. I'm seeing 1 fish, and we all. Hugh got up to the top of the tower. Bob got up to the tree next to me. I think we were all looking, and I think Bob had the binoculars on it, and he said, "It's huge," and I could just see this great dark shape on the far side of the lake, which is only maybe 50, 60 yards wide at the most, but you could see it. It was a massive fish, and that was that's when it became really serious, because we thought that fish was as big as the giant in Redmire, which I had only ever seen once, and I think only 3 or 4 other people had ever seen. And so they don't look like carp. They just look like a cow browsing on the lake bed, because they just look so big when you see something that size. I mean, I don't know what it was, maybe 60, maybe 70 pounds. But anyway, it's a big fish, and we never saw it again. It slowly went down, but that galvanized us, and we made sure we concentrated a bit more. Bob used to do all-nighters in his bed chair, and I would get there at dawn occasionally. But I felt that evening would be the best time. I don't know why, I just thought that was... And I did get a couple of nice fish, but no monsters. And we managed to sort of more or less put it all together. And then with a sort of family reunion at the end, which was quite... It was a good way to end, because they were desperate. I had 2 of my children were born during the making of Passion for Angling, and I had to be absent for much of that time, and I found that very difficult, because I like to be with them as much as possible, and I always work from home, and so to be away from home during those 3 years, 4 years really, it extended to in the end. It was quite tricky, but anyway, so they all came. We had this lovely boat party. We caught the fish, and then Alex and my daughter Camilla were fishing, and William, who was probably 2, then he was just preparing the bait and eating it in the punt that we were sort of sitting in, and my daughter Ellen was not with us. She was in my wife Claire's arms on the bank. But apart from everything else, it just worked so well as a sort of closing scene. And that was the as far as I was concerned, that was the end of it. We weren't going to do any more, because we were by the time those years had passed, we'd had quite enough of it, and yet we were very happy with the way it all turned out. So that's Passion for Angling, and what I would like to do now would be, because all of you who've seen the film would probably have questions that you would like to ask about it, and this has only taken 20 minutes to go through it, and I'd like to roll the rest of the evening off with questions and answers, if you like, about how certain things happened, because some of the things that did happen I'd completely forgotten about. You know, I haven't seen it myself. I saw it when it came on live on BBC Two, sort of 7:30 I think it was, on a Sunday evening. Good time, and it was a massive hit. You know, they were getting first 2 million, 3 million. I don't think it ever made 4 million, but that was a lot in those days. The viewership went up all the time. So, and the fact that it's still, you know, quite held in quite high regard by television people. I'm not surprised that they didn't try and get us to do it. I think they knew that we wouldn't ever be able to do it quite the same, and it wouldn't be as good. It just couldn't happen again. So anyway, if anybody has something to ask. I see a cheeky face down in the foreground. Don't I recognise that face?
Sorry. What was the funniest moment for you in Passion for Angling? Or one of the funniest moments?
There were several very funny moments. You know, comic moments. I think my favourite moment is definitely Kevin with the scarecrow, because it was such a. They wouldn't let when I fished Redmire as a official member of the syndicate. They didn't want me to do it. I said, I've got a great idea. It's okay if we just put a scarecrow up on the shallows, bait it up, and then when the fish get really used to it, I'm going to go out and put the coat on the scarecrow's weight, and see if that works. It would be a nice way to do it, because then you could be up right amongst the carp. As long as you didn't move, you wouldn't spook them. And it would be quite an experience. And it worked. It absolutely worked. But when we did it for real, and they were round me, and they were taking the bait, and then I hooked a fish. Of course, it got off, which was a disaster. And then they knew. And the thing about Redmire carp, they learn very quickly. And once they've learnt that lesson, they don't unlearn it. So I thought, this is going to take a long, long time to get that to happen again. So that was my comic moment, because I messed it up, and it was.
I know the answer to this one because I've been here before. Have you ever used a boilie?
Curiously, no, I have. And the first time I used a boilie was and that ties in. I'd totally forgotten when we went to Redmire, that first Sunday, which was in the 16th of June. And it opened on a Sunday. I'm sure it was a Sunday. It might have been a Monday. We got down on a Sunday. Rod Hutchinson, my great carp fishing mate, he said, and he was there at the bidding. He just a good luck rate at the end of it. And take some of these. And it was his, catch 'em baits. Rod Hutchinson was the best carp angler I have ever fished with. He was just so good. And and I met him at Redmire. We fished together, and I just thought, I like this man. He was a scaffolder, from Lincolnshire. So we were completely different. I was a photographer then, and he was so inspiring. He would just suddenly say something. We're at the wrong end of the lake. No, this is where the wind's blowing. This is how you fish for carp. No, we don't. They're up the other end today. And he would just know. And he was so determined that even though it might be raining all day, he would still be sitting there waiting. It's going to happen. And it nearly always did. He was so successful in that way. And then with his baits. And so it was him who gave me my first boilie. Because by then he had catch 'em baits going. Sorry, that was an exploding microphone. He had catch 'em baits was his own little ambition. Get it so he could retire from scaffolding and just make a living from fishing. And he gave me a bag of, now what were they? They were peach boilies. And I said, I'll and they weren't hard. They weren't, They were like, it was like sort of just paste, and I caught my. I have to admit, I've never confessed this before. I caught my first that first fish. You see me, but it doesn't matter. The truth can come out now. It's too late now.
It's already out.
It's already out.
We do it with lots.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't maggots, which you see me baiting up with. Before I cast, I'd switched from maggots to this. Oh no, it wasn't peach. It was plum. Plum boilie, and I caught the carp on that. So yes, I have used, and it didn't work again. I didn't catch it again. I think Bob certainly caught them on. Yeah, he didn't mind. He wasn't like me. It just turned my nose up at stuff. He would go for it, which is a much better way to catch fish. Where I would be a bit more of a purist, which is always slightly defeatist in a way. But, sir.
The blowpipe.
Sorry?
Did you start first using the blowpipe?
Oh, no, I didn't start the blowpipe at Redmire. I would use it quite regularly with sweet corn to bait up down, tricky place under the willow. Catapult there's too much movement in the catapult, or they'd land too fast. And the fish would, I don't know. I just had this feeling I could do it with a blowpipe. I mean, that's just free baiting. But if you could get that little gap in the willows with the blowpipe and the bait, and with the bait and the hook, which I could do, because I'm quite mean with the blowpipe. So it would just be 3 or 4 grains, and it's about a 1/4 inch diameter pipe, just over a yard long, fed down the top end, and then you could shoot it within. I mean, anyone who comes for tea at my house will know. There's certain bells hang around the room, and I said, we always get round to blowpiping or whatever, the sport of the day, and I would shoot these bells, and I still do it. I got to keep in practice. So you can get, it's not difficult. It's easier than, you can get a treble 20 every time with a blowpipe. Because once I went to a pub and I said, darts tonight? Oh no, this is blowpipe night. That's how blowpipes came out. That's right. That's how they came. A pub called the Skimmington Castle, on Reigate Heath. Yeah. And Monday night, blowpipe night. And I thought, this is good. This is going to be good. And they just had a barrel. The darts were literally the barrel with 2 little rings, like curtain rings, fore and aft, and then the point. That's all it was. And it fitted perfectly into the blowpipe, and you get the pressure you need, and you could get, once you got the hang of it, you could get a treble 20 every time. So they were quite boring scores, because if you missed the treble 20, that was it. You lost the game, and that's where it came from, because I was sort of anyway. Yes, so blowpiping. No one does. Does anybody do blowpiping? No. It's also kind of formal now and kind of predictable. But yeah, blowpipes are a good. When you're stalking fish, blowpipes are good. Man, can we get off blowpipes now?
This was the first fishing programme, and probably one of the only ones, where my wife sat with me and watched the whole lot and looked forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember after the first one, I went to work the next day, and one of my colleagues, she turned around to me and she said, "Now I know why you go fishing." What do you think it was that allowed it to transcend across a population like that?
I think what your wife saw in the kind of the joy that we had, just in fishing, just the and the connection you get to the landscape when you're fishing, and it just seems so natural. It doesn't seem, and yet most people don't quite, if they don't fish, I mean, they don't see it quite like that. But it is basically a connection, connection with the natural world. And I think that's why once it was, because Hugh explained that very well, just with images, that it wasn't just the fish, it was the whole scene, it was the landscape, it was the way you observed the landscape, it was your reactions to the weather and everything, and it made it seem like the world was a much more innocent place, and yet also a more meaningful place. And I think that came across really well. I mean, that's what I've always tried to do when I'm writing about whatever, fishing first, and now I'm writing about other things too. But yes, it's that connection. That's why it worked. And people, even though they never even thought about fishing, those millions who did watch it, they seemed to get that message. And it was the way Hugh conveyed the message which made it, I think, such a success, because it was quite a simple story, but it was told so well.
I have a question about, I spoke to Philip Amies, who was in the last program, in the Monster Myth program, who was the biologist on the estate at
Oh yes,
at Wimmer
yes.
Giles. And I was talking to him about why the carp were stocked at that particular lake, because they were stocked a year before Redmire in 30.
That's right, yes.
And he said that in the 70s and 80s there was actually not that much weed in that lake, so he didn't think it was because of the weed growth, and that why the carp were introduced at Redmire.
Yes.
Do you have any idea, because there were a lot of carp stocked, I think they stocked 200 king carp there do you have any idea why they were stuck there in the 30s? We know Redmire, they were stuck for weed.
Ornamental.
Weed, but
it was for the weed, yeah, because there was a general kind of consensus that carp would keep weed down, but also for ornamental reasons. Exactly. And they were all 5-6 inches long. I've got it was the one page I took out of the Donald Leaney kind of stock books, which he gave me, or his son gave me when Donald Leaney died, because we were very good friends. He was a lovely man, and we took that page out so that Hugh could film the actual. He couldn't get, because it was twisted, it was bent because it was big old files. He said we need it flat, so we had to take the page out. So we could film that date on. And what things are like when things are there's a lot going on, and the page disappeared. I never got it back, and but yeah, that was the reason though. The original Lord Shaftesbury, it wasn't the original Lord Shaftesbury, but the Lord Shaftesbury who we knew, who unfortunately didn't last much longer after we met him. He said it was mainly for keeping the weed down, because there was a belief in his father's time that was a good thing to do, and also for ornamental reasons. But the fact that it was shallow, it was pure water, chalk stream water. It was very rich water. I think that, and it was a very good strain of carp. That's why they grew so big.
They never spawned, I think you said.
It's cold. It was very cold. It was quite a few springs, and being shallow, it would warm up, but it didn't warm up at the right time, when they were spawning. Maybe I don't know quite why they never spawned, because there must have been hot summers where they could have reached the optimum temperature for successful spawning, but they never did. But yeah, there used to be some very big fish. I never got one. The best I ever got was a 26-pounder. I got the one on the film, which was 22 pounds, a common. And then I got a 26-pounder, which was fantastic looking, common carp. But and Bob got a little one from, and we were never quite sure where that little one came from. But we won't say any more about that. Maybe jumped out of the stream that flowed by.
When you're actually filming Passion for Angling, could you picture who the audience was going to be? It's a similar question been asked already, but while you're actually filming it, were you actually presenting for anglers, for families? I've got a reason for asking. I worked in a treatment centre in Bournemouth in those days, in a drug and alcohol unit, and it was quite interesting to see that the most popular programme of the week was in fact that programme, and a room full of crack addicts and alcoholics.
Brilliant.
But I'm sure you didn't picture that, Bob. And who were you actually doing it for at the time, not what you've learned since?
We didn't have a specific audience. We just thought, because Hugh has made films with David Attenborough, and he knew that the natural world was always a draw. That was always a good audience draw, and because it was about the natural world, there was a lot of other things beside fishing that went on, was sort of woven through the plot, and because Bob and I were, we were doing the same kind of things, but we were doing them differently. I think that worked quite well. I think there was a nice kind of chemistry then, and I think the fact that I was a traditionalist, Bob was a much more kind of contemporary angler, and yeah, that worked quite well. And people understood that. You know, they didn't have to be fishermen; they could tell from what we were doing. And Bob's methods were definitely more efficient than mine, but very often I would get the kind of fish we needed in at least some of the episodes. But yes, it was. I think they knew that it was going to work. If the water sides looked stunning, the lighting had to be stunning. Everything had to be, and it did. In a way, even when it rained, he made it look really appealing. And he gave the reason why fishermen would stand out in the rain all day, because we were completely, we were the ones who were hooked. We were hooked on whatever it was we were after. We were going to make sure we were there long enough to have that chance, at least to make contact. And I think people understood that kind of, it's a kind of theatre really, theatre of never happening or maybe happening, and it was not that sort of, that unknown factor, I think, which is always good about fishing. You can never quite tell what's going to happen, and that was again conveyed very well, I think, by Hugh. Sir.
Slight diversion. A personal friend of mine, Jason White. How much at the time did you enjoy fishing our local stour at Shillingstown?
I enjoyed it tremendously. It was for 2 or 3 years. That was my. It was like gravity. I would be pulled towards it. If I was going to go fishing, river fishing anyway, I would tench fish and carp fish. But if it was a river, I would go there, because then I had my stripy hat on. I was determined to get one of them, because there was some gigantic perch in that stretch then. I don't know if they still are, and big chub, huge chub, and the fact that I didn't know the river, it was the upper reaches really, the mid-upper reaches of the Stour, and it was such a beautiful and intimate place. Being small, it was always, you never got a broad pool. The widest it was, the sort of half the width of this village hall. And yet it was full of mystery. I'd never fished anywhere quite like it. Although I always liked small rivers, they're more intimate anyway. But it was, and it didn't seem to be fished much. It's miles and miles of it, and you never knew what you were going to find. And yeah, yes, I do miss it actually. That's one of the, because I don't fish much. I did catch a nice crucian last summer, and I'm going to go and catch another nice crucian this summer. But it's as you probably know, I'm my heart's been stolen by a bird. But it's. Yeah, thank you. Any last question on passion?
So as well as passion for angling, I really enjoyed the 2 films you did with Sticky. With the technology that moved on by the time you did Sticky compared to Passion for Angling, did you notice much of a difference? Which did you prefer?
Yes, there was a bit of there was a contrast, put it like that. Yeah, I just noticed the contrast. But I think it worked.
So So if you had to do it again, which would you choose to do again, the passion for angling or the sticky sort of side of things from a filming point of view? What was your favourite?
I think it would have to be passion, because it was so new to us. You know, it did get tiresome at times, because Hugh was he was a real perfectionist, which is why it looked so. You know, we would go over and over and over. Sometimes we would have to do. I remember once Bob and I going to view the spay, and we just had a line we needed to give, a certain line which introduced that whole scene, and we did that. We did that same scene 26 times before we got it right. You know, we would, whether we'd be laughing, and then we'd trip up on the word, and it was just the way, you know, how does this river? It was a spectacular valley. We were looking at the spay coming, and we were trying to catch a salmon. That whole fortnight, we never got one. Bob got a nice, he got a nice trout, but that was it. And Hugh was I think he was a bit miffed. We were pretty crappy at salmon fishing. Although we did make up when we went back in the autumn. Anyway, yes, I think the early days of passion were the best.
Whilst you was fishing passion, did you come across any monsters?
Any
Monsters?
Well, Harry, and but not in the rivers. We did, we did see. Yeah, we did see several good fish, but no true monsters. No, although I think Hugh did. You know, when we were late arriving, Hugh did get a couple of big roach while we. You know, he would get. I think he got 3 2-pounders one day while we were just sort of messing around trying to get things together, and he was very that they were his fish. Roach were his fish, and he wanted us to catch a big roach from the Kennet, and then of course Bob got one fantastic looking fish. It was only just under, you know, it was 2.15.5 or something, and I said, for God's sake, Bob, don't be so honest. That's a 3-pounder. No. But anyway, it was that was one of the monsters.
How did the conversation go when Bob had that pike out of that swim?
Had the what out of the?
Bob had that pike out of the swim.
The conversation. I can't even repeat it.
Oh, go on. Go on.
No.
That bad?
Yeah, it was that bad. Yeah. But, yeah. I don't want to go over that ground again. It leaves me feeling ill. I feel too bitter about it, and he feels too guilty. That's it. Good. We can now talk. Let's talk about something else.
I'm just going to ask one question. Just you mentioned obviously part of the success was the parody of different angling styles.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think what do you think Bob would say he learned from you angling style, and what if anything did you take from Bob's angling in terms of learning or that you know how you fished?
He was quite meticulous, so I suppose in a way I would think, yeah, I'm never going to be able to do that quite like that. But yes, it was an education seeing how he prepared for say the roach, and he did catch a fantastic grayling in the winter session. We did find some lovely grayling on the Kennet, yeah, that was rather special, that bit of river. So I think that what I take away as a sort of pleasure from Passion for Angling, or took away as a kind of pleasure, was the discovery of all these lovely new waters. And Hugh was very good at wangling his way into these private stretches. And in fact, to get to the lake here down at Wimborne St Giles, which has never ever been fished, he wrote a letter and he sent it to me. He said, "What do you think?" He wrote a letter to Lord Shaftesbury and said, "This is what we're doing. This is what we've done so far, and we would love," and it was so well. He didn't force the issue, but he just said, "We would really love to fish your lake, and we would portray it exactly as you would like us to portray it." and that would be the completion of our series. And it was a very convincing letter, but you know, he would make a very good poker player, Hugh, and we got the place for as long as we needed. You know,
Can I be really cheeky and ask a last question? I've noticed there's a lot of fishery managers in the room that look after fisheries, and for the younger generation, what advice might you give us to try and look after, to protect and preserve these fisheries in future? I'm just interested in your perception on how to do it and anything that springs to mind.
you could march to the Houses of Parliament and demand that all the boards of all the water companies in the country be sacked. That would be a good thing to do. And then you could explain that there are quite a few people, quite a few millions of people, who have a very kind of, you know, they get out of everybody's way, especially at weekends and holidays. No one knows where they go, but it's something to do with water. And that's what you should sort of just tell people.
Sorry, one I
Yes.
really want to find out about. You may have seen, literally in the last few days, I know over the last month, the eel record has been broken at £11 3 ounce, and also the British roach record has been matched at £4 3 ounce, if I remember correctly. Did you ever think those records will be beaten or broke?
There's always a chance, you know, and I mean, I haven't seen an image of the eel yet. My minder friend over here, he's got it. Have you got it on your phone? No, he doesn't. No, not now. He's going to show me his eel. I don't know whether I want to see it.
It's still just an eel.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that eel is spectacular. You know, it's a stupendous fish. That's like catching a sort of 80-pound carp. And it was completely natural, obviously. It managed to survive all those years. I don't know how old does an eel like that have to be?
They can live to 100, but
yeah,
that fish would have been 60.
Yeah. But yes, and I certainly think the roach record could go at any time again. You know, it's in the right environment, possibly a still water fish rather than a river fish. But anyway, yes, it's nice to know that it's those monsters are still lurking about and people are catching them.
Chris, begging one last question. How widely have you travelled around the planet fishing?
I have my own private jet.
Have you been to the, when I was just thinking of,
I'm going to Borneo tonight. After this, I've got to hurry. I've got a flight.
thinking of New Zealand, and the eels there are like congers. I just wondered whether you'd ever been to the Antipodes.
No, I like to keep, mostly I like to keep my fishing local. I like to know exactly what I'm going to find when I get there, because even then I won't be sure that I'll ever catch anything. So I like that intimacy that I have with my favourite places. But I have travelled at least across Europe. I fished Norway back in the 70s, and I fished Norway in. I fished Poland as well, and that same decade, and I made programs for Polish TV. Not Polish. What am I talking about? The last country I went to was Norway. They all look the same to me, you know, and I can't understand what they say. They all speak the same strange language. No, I really love Norway. Norway was a beautiful country, and the fishing is, spectacular. And the biggest crucians that I saw were in Norway. Really big crucians, yeah.
How big were they?
6.5 pounds. Under threat of death, I am not to reveal their location. But no, I don't think it was. Yes, it was definitely a 6-pounder. They would get, and the Swedes catch huge huge crucians as well. From that bit of the, it looks like the bit of the sea. What's it called? That area of ocean and it's sort of thank you, the Baltic. I have my geography teacher here. Yeah. So yes, but and Norway was. I saw my first ever osprey in Norway. I got it wrong again. I saw my first ever sea eagle in Norway. Saw my first ever osprey in Poland. Fished France a lot, mostly the rivers. Enjoyed that very much. It's so much variety. The trouble is there's so much of it. It's sort of overwhelming, really. Where you don't want to go everywhere because you see nothing then, or you discover nothing. That's always been my kind of belief. You can't just keep sort of landing on a flower and moving off to the next, like a butterfly. I think I like to sort of completely sink into a landscape before I get to understand it, get to know it, and that's how I would catch my fish. You'd have to learn through observation, really, and sense. Sense is vital. You've got to have a sense of what's going on around you, and you can only do that by being there as much as possible. And you start to notice the signs. It's like hen. So I shouldn't be talking about hen harriers, but I'm going to have to now. The process of the process of fishing is very much the same as birding, you know. And some people don't like that term, birding. You talk about fishing. Birding is the same. You're not an ornithologist, but you're appreciating the image of the bird, the flight of the bird, especially the flight. I have an emotional sense of that bird, and when it goes by in a particular way. The hen harrier is just it's like a ghost in some respects when you see it in the evening, especially the male. But it has that otherworldly quality that I would see in a very big carp, for instance, or a very big barbel. Just see it sort of going across the gravel, and it had that same sense as, you know, this isn't of this world. This is from some other dimension. And I always get the fact that they're also very elusive, hen harriers. I might only see them a dozen times every winter, but it's.
Save it for part 2.
What's that?
Save it for part 2.
No, this is part 2. I'm closing now. So yes, there's. So, and it's just travelling around. You know, you get closer to things, and but you've got to give yourself time. I didn't realise we were having. Of course, we've got to have the. We've got to have the auction.
You know the format. You've done 6 of these.
Yeah, no, it's been so long, and I apologise. That's another apology I didn't make, that I wasn't able to attend. I take it you all came anyway, even though I had COVID last year. You probably had a much more enjoyable time than if I had been here. But yes, I'm sorry about that. It was very badly timed. But anyway, I'm here now, and it appears from my minder that we're going to have a break now. And so thank you for being a patient audience, and see you in another 10 minutes.